Why did the entire training yard freeze the moment she smirked at him? The heat was already unbearable, shimmering off the desert concrete like ripples from an unseen fire. But when Lieutenant Mara Hale lifted her chin, dust sticking to the sweat on her skin, eyes calm where they should have been trembling, every soldier watching felt something sharper than heat crawl up their spine. Colonel Reeves had ordered her to take off her uniform. Not in private, not in an office. Here, in the yard, where humiliation would stick like a stain. "Take off your uniform," he barked. "You're done here." His voice cracked across the base, bouncing off metal walls, slicing through the murmurs of routine drills. Soldiers abandoned whatever they were doing, some stepping into the sunlight, others peering from the mess hall windows, boots scuffing against concrete as they crowded to witness something that did not feel right. No one smiled. No one whispered. Everyone held their breath, because even the stubborn ones didn't defy Reeves. But Mara had just smirked. Not a wide grin, not mockery. Just a tiny, almost invisible curve that lasted no more than a second. And it changed the air. A corporal standing nearby swallowed. "She's done. He's going to bury her." But another voice, older, steadier, answered from behind him. "No, look at her eyes." And when he did, he saw it too. She wasn't afraid. Inside Mara's chest, her heartbeat wasn't frantic the way it used to be when Reeves cornered her in hallways or shut the door a little too slowly behind her during late-night reviews. She didn't tremble the way she did the first time he implied she wasn't loyal. She didn't bow the way he wanted when he began calling her a liability. Not today. Today something inside her felt quietly unshakable, like steel cooling and hardening after being bent too many times. Still, she felt the familiar layer of dust settle on her shoulders as the wind picked up. It brushed her cheek like a reminder, a promise from the earth itself. "You're not alone. Not anymore." Reeves stepped closer, his boots grinding against gravel. He towered over her, jaw tight enough to crack. "You heard me," he hissed. "Strip the uniform now." His voice dipped low, poisonous, the tone he used when he wanted to remind someone the difference between rank and power. She looked him dead in the eyes. He wanted her to break. He wanted her to beg. He wanted to see the moment she lost hope. But instead, she reached for the first button of her jacket. And the crowd leaned forward, breath hitching. Not because she was obeying, but because of how she did it, slow, steady, defiant. She wasn't undressing. She was calling him out, forcing him to face the truth he'd been burying, challenging the idea that he could take her dignity the way he took everything else he wanted. There was something she hadn't told anyone. Not the other lieutenants she ate with. Not the sergeant who trusted her more than most. Not even the medic who once pulled her aside and whispered, "If he's doing something, you can tell me. I'll help." She didn't tell them what she'd seen, what she'd discovered, what she'd documented. Not yet. A private whispered to his friend, "Why is he doing this in public?" The friend shook his head, "Because he thinks no one will stand up to him." He wasn't wrong. Reeves had spent years crafting the perfect kind of fear, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't shout or punish, the kind that slowly convinces people that resistance is pointless. He knew how to tilt the system without making it scream, how to bury irregularities under paperwork, how to make people doubt their instincts. Until Mara refused to sign. Until she refused to correct equipment logs. Until she refused to cover for missing supplies. Until she refused to pretend she didn't see transport crates being moved at 3 a.m. That was when Reeves realized something dangerous. Mara had a conscience he couldn't intimidate. And now he wanted it gone. She wasn't smiling at him. She was smiling at the truth that the moment he pushed her too far, he'd pushed himself into something far worse. Reeves leaned in, so close she could smell the cologne he used to mask the sweat under his uniform. "You don't know what you've just done," he whispered. But Mara had heard that tone before, from men who thought power was a shield, not a mirror. From men who forgot that silence isn't submission, that decent people don't break, they endure. "I know exactly what I've done," she said quietly. He stiffened. A ripple passed through the watching soldiers, something like recognition, something like hope, something like the sharp inhale before lightning crashes. Then the ground trembled. A siren blared, long, mechanical, urgent. The gate alarm. Heads snapped toward the entrance. Dust swirled under massive tires as a convoy rolled in, armored vehicles rumbling like prehistoric beasts waking from sleep. Everyone straightened. No one knew who was arriving, but everyone felt it. The first vehicle halted, doors swung open. Soldiers stepped out wearing crisp uniforms, patches gleaming under the brutal sun. Their movements were sharp, synchronized, too precise to be ordinary. Then she emerged. General Lorraine Cutter. A legend. A name whispered like myth in leadership courses. A woman whose footsteps were studied by cadets, but rarely witnessed in person. And she was walking straight toward Mara and Reeves. Her cane struck the concrete, tap, 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 each thud carrying more authority than Reeves' entire command. A wave spread through the crowd. Soldiers straightened instinctively, some whispering her name with disbelief. Others simply stared as if witnessing history. Reeves paled. Mara felt her chest tighten again, but this time for a different reason. Cutter was her last resort, the person she'd sent everything to: evidence, reports, photos, files, the truth. But she had no idea if Cutter had believed her. No idea if she would come. No idea if she would act. Yet here she was. Cutter stopped right between them. Her eyes, sharp enough to cut steel, moved from Mara's half-unbuttoned jacket to Reeves' clenched jaw. "Lieutenant," Cutter said softly, her voice warm in a way only earned by those who have seen too much. "Steady, you called." Mara swallowed. Reeves jolted. "General, she had no authority. This is a disciplinary situation," Reeves sputtered. Cutter raised one hand. He went silent instantly. She reached into a folder held by one of her aides and lifted a thin stack of papers, too thin to topple a man's career. Yet the yard felt the shift, like the world inhaled and waited. "I received documents," she said. "Evidence of misconduct, theft, intimidation, and threats." Whispers exploded behind them. "All traced back," she continued slowly, "to you, Colonel Reeves." He stumbled back half a step, jaw quivering. And that was when everything broke open. Soldiers emerged from doorways, from shadows, from hallways, like truth itself had been waiting for permission to breathe. The air became thick with disbelief, relief, fury, and something deeper. The kind of unity that forms only when people realize they weren't imagining the wrongness after all. Reeves lunged for the folder. But 6 MPs closed in immediately, boots slamming the concrete in a rhythm that felt like justice thundering forward. He fought only for a second, then sagged. As the handcuffs tightened around his wrists, he hissed at Mara, "You just ruined your life." But Mara shook her head, voice low. "No, I saved everyone else from you." And somewhere in the crowd, someone began clapping. Then another. And another. Until the entire yard erupted into applause under the merciless sun. Sounds of relief, of vindication, of a weight lifted off shoulders too used to carrying it. General Cutter placed a gentle hand on Mara's shoulder. "You kept your integrity," she said quietly. "That uniform belongs to you. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." A lump rose in Mara's throat. Cutter's voice lowered even further, words soft but unshakable. "Sometimes dignity doesn't raise its voice," she said. "Sometimes it simply stands and waits for the truth to catch up." The wind shifted again, warmer this time, less biting. Dust lifted from the ground like the earth itself was finally exhaling. And Mara, for the first time in months, did too. Why did she feel more alone in victory than she ever had in fear? The base erupted in applause after Reeves was taken away, but as the cheers swelled, Mara felt something strange inside her chest, something tight, hollow, almost trembling. Relief wasn't clean. It came mixed with exhaustion, memory, and a quiet ache she couldn't shake. People clapped. People stared. People whispered her name now with respect, not caution. But inside, Mara felt a silence no one else could hear. General Cutter kept her hand on Mara's shoulder a moment longer, steady and grounding, before turning toward the MPs escorting Reeves away. "Secure him," she ordered, "and seal his office. Do not let anyone touch a single document." Her voice carried authority like weight on steel. But Mara barely heard the rest. Her breathing felt shallow, as if the suddenly wide-open sky pressed too heavily on her lungs. She watched the convoy door close behind Reeves, watched the dust settle around the tires, watched the edges of a chapter in her life fold sharply, painfully. "You did the right thing," someone whispered behind her. She didn't turn. Doing the right thing didn't always feel right. A younger private approached her hesitantly. "Lieutenant, you okay?" She almost said yes out of habit. But something in her stopped. A truth she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge until this moment. She wasn't okay. Not really. Not beneath the surface where the bruises didn't show. "I'm fine," she murmured anyway. The lie came too easily. Cutter watched her quietly, as if she saw the truth beneath Mara's carefully controlled voice. But the general didn't press. She simply gave a small nod toward the administrative wing. "Walk with me," she said. Mara hesitated. The soldiers parted instinctively as she stepped forward beside Cutter, their expressions a mixture of gratitude and awe. She felt their eyes following her every movement, as if she'd suddenly become a symbol rather than a person. And that terrified her more than Reeves ever had. She didn't want to be a symbol. She wanted to be unseen, or at least unburdened. But the thing about moral choices, the kind you don't walk away from, is that they change you whether you wanted them to or not. They walked in silence for several minutes, boots crunching gravel, wind tugging at their uniforms. The entire base seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. When they reached a shaded walkway, Cutter finally spoke. "You held yourself well out there," she said. Mara kept her gaze fixed ahead. "I didn't feel like I did." "That's usually how strength works," Cutter replied softly. "It feels heavier from the inside." The words landed harder than intended. Something in Mara's throat tightened. She swallowed it down, forcing her steps to remain even. "But I need to ask you something," Cutter continued, "and I need the truth." Mara braced herself. "Why didn't you come to me sooner? You had enough evidence months ago." Mara stopped walking. Wind rustled a flag behind them. Shadows stretched across the concrete like long fingers reaching from the past. "It wasn't fear," Mara said finally. "Not exactly." "Then what was it?" She exhaled shakily. "I didn't want to destroy the base." Cutter studied her, eyebrows lifting with a mix of surprise and understanding. "This place isn't perfect," Mara said, "but it's home to people who deserve better. People who wake up every day believing in something clean. People who follow orders with honesty. If I went after him openly, everything would collapse on top of them." "You were trying to protect the others." "I didn't want the whole unit punished for the mistakes of one man," Mara whispered. Cutter nodded slowly. Integrity with a conscience, rare, dangerous, necessary. They resumed walking, but Mara's legs felt heavier. "Why didn't you tell anyone what Reeves did to you directly?" Cutter asked quietly. A question she'd been avoiding. A truth she didn't want to revisit. Mara's jaw tightened. Because then it becomes about me. And you didn't want to be seen. She looked down, not like that. Cutter's cane tapped the ground 3 times, measured, thoughtful. Lieutenant, Cutter said gently, you don't need to carry this alone anymore. The words struck deeper than expected. Mara closed her eyes briefly, feeling emotions she'd pushed down for too long rising like water against a dam. Memories flickered. Reeves cornering her during midnight inventory checks. His hand blocking her way out as he lowered his voice. His recommendations disguised as threats. His promise that if she filed a report it would vanish, and so would she. His smirk when she refused to sign the falsified documents. The way he made loyalty feel like a leash. The worst wasn't the intimidation. It was the doubt. The nights when she wondered if anyone would believe her. The mornings she stared at herself in the mirror wondering if she was overreacting. The slow erosion of trust, not in him, but in her own judgment. Cutter didn't push. She simply let the silence sit until it settled. Let me show you something, Cutter finally said. She led Mara into a small briefing room where MPs were already collecting files from Reeves' desk. Stacks of folders, maps, encrypted drives, all being cataloged like pieces of a fallen empire. Cutter handed her a sealed envelope. Mara frowned. What is this? The testimonies, Cutter said, from others he threatened. The world tilted slightly beneath Mara's feet. He wasn't targeting just you, Cutter added softly. He had a pattern. You were simply the one who refused to bend. Mara slowly opened the envelope, her fingers trembling despite her effort to remain steady. Inside were 3 written statements. 3 names she recognized. 3 people she had once thought were silent bystanders. They hadn't been silent. They'd been afraid. Just like she had been. A lump formed in her throat as she read the first page, shaking handwriting, careful sentences, fear between every line. And then another page from a soldier who had left the base 2 months ago. And the last from someone still serving, who had signed without hesitation the moment Cutter asked. Her vision blurred. She hadn't been alone. Only she thought she'd been. Cutter's voice softened. This wasn't just your fight, you need to understand that. Mara clutched the pages, her breath growing unsteady. I kept wondering, she whispered, if I was overreacting. You were. If anyone else saw what he did. They did. If anyone else felt what I did. They did. Her shoulders sagged. A long breath left her body as if she'd been holding it for months. Cutter placed a gentle hand on her arm, grounding her. Listen carefully. You didn't bring this base shame. You gave it integrity. You reminded every person here that silence is not loyalty. Mara's eyes stung, but she blinked the feeling away. She wasn't used to being comforted. She wasn't used to letting people in. Cutter saw the struggle in her posture, the rigidness in her breathing. You've been holding yourself together with discipline alone, Cutter said quietly. That's admirable, but it's not sustainable. Mara looked at her, chest aching. Then how do I let go? Cutter didn't answer with words. She simply handed Mara a chair. A simple gesture. Unexpected. Human. And suddenly, Mara realized she needed to sit. When she sank into the chair, the tension in her spine finally collapsed. Her hands trembled openly now, no longer hidden under sleeves or fists. Good, Cutter whispered. Now breathe. Mara inhaled shakily. Exhaled unevenly. Something fragile cracked inside her, not broken but finally opening. Cutter waited patiently, giving her space to fall apart silently, with dignity. When Mara finally steadied, Cutter spoke again, her voice a quiet thread of truth. Strength isn't what you showed in the yard, she said. Strength is what you're doing now. Mara looked up, eyes tired but clear. What's that? Feeling what you denied yourself for too long. Mara didn't know how to answer. She only knew the truth of it hurt, and yet it also healed. Outside, the wind blew softly against the windows. For the first time, it didn't feel harsh. It felt like a promise, a shift, a beginning. Sometimes justice didn't roar. Sometimes it whispered, "You're free to breathe again." Why did the base feel so different once the danger was gone? Mara stepped out of the briefing room, but the air that met her felt unfamiliar, lighter yet somehow heavier. The sun still burned the same, the wind still dragged dust across the concrete, the distant hum of generators still echoed like a tired heartbeat. And yet, nothing felt the same. People were watching her differently now. Not with suspicion, not with doubt, not with the silent fear Reeves used to cultivate like a shadow. They looked at her with respect she didn't know how to carry. A sergeant she barely knew nodded at her. A pair of mechanics paused mid-conversation as she passed, giving her a small salute. Even the younger soldiers, the ones who used to avoid eye contact whenever Reeves walked by, now stepped out of her path with an unfamiliar sense of gratitude. She didn't know where to place any of it. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like exposure. She walked faster, needing space, needing somewhere quiet, needing something she couldn't name. The barracks door creaked when she pushed it open. Inside, the room was dim, cool, familiar. Her bunk was neatly made as she'd left it. Her locker stood open, exactly the way she always kept it. The scent of fabric detergent lingered in the air. She sat on her bed and finally allowed her shoulders to slump. For a brief moment, she felt the weight of the world land on her spine. The truth was simple and sharp. Standing up to Reeves had been the easy part. Living after it, processing the aftermath, that was harder. She dropped her head into her hands. Exhaustion spread through her limbs like water soaking into every muscle. She wasn't just tired. She was drained, hollow, a shell the storm had passed through too quickly. A soft knock sounded on the doorframe. She looked up. Sergeant Niall Torres leaned against the doorway, arms crossed over his chest, expression cautious, like he wasn't sure if he should enter or retreat. "You disappear the second the general lets you go," he said quietly. "Not surprising." She tried to muster a small smile but failed. "I just needed some air." He stepped inside without waiting for permission, pulling up the metal chair beside her bunk and sitting down. "I heard what Cutter said," he murmured, "about others coming forward." Mara rubbed her thumb along the seam of her sleeve. "I didn't know." "None of us did," Torres said. "Reeves knew how to isolate people. He wanted each of us to feel like we were alone." She let out a slow breath. "He almost made me believe that." Torres stared at her for a long moment. "You want to know the truth?" "I thought I already did." "No," he said. "I mean the truth about you." She frowned slightly. "You think you're weak because you feel things," Torres said. "Because you care too much. Because what he did got inside your head. But that just means you're human, not hollow like he wanted you to be." She looked away, jaw tightening. "Caring almost got me destroyed." "Caring is what saved every one of us," Torres answered quietly. "You were the first one to step forward. That matters." Mara's eyes burned unexpectedly. She blinked fast, forcing the heat to fade. Torres didn't push. He simply sat there watching her without judgment, something she wasn't used to. A long silence stretched between them, comfortable and heavy. Then he asked the question she'd been avoiding since everything happened. "What now?" She exhaled slowly, feeling the uncertainty roll through her. "I don't know," she admitted. The answer surprised her. She'd spent so long fighting Reeves' corruption, so long focused on survival, so long viewing each day as a battle, she had no map for life after him. Torres nodded slowly, as if he expected that. A few seconds later, voices echoed from outside. Heavy boots, urgent tones, radio chatter. Mara's instincts sharpened instantly. "What's happening?" she whispered. Tor stood, already listening. "Something going on outside." Mara rose to her feet. The exhaustion evaporated beneath a layer of trained alertness. Together, they moved quickly toward the door and stepped onto the walkway. Across the yard, soldiers were gathering, but not with celebration this time. Not with relief. With tension. With confusion. With fear. Cutter stood at the center of a forming circle of troops, her cane planted firmly, her expression sharp and unreadable. Mara and Tors pushed through the crowd until they reached the front. A communications officer stood beside Cutter, holding a tablet that flickered with incoming data. Cutter's gaze found Mara instantly. "Lieutenant," she said, her voice grave, "I need you." Mara's pulse quickened. "What happened?" Cutter gestured to the tablet. "Reeves didn't act alone." The words punched the air out of Mara's lungs. The officer enlarged a map marked with supply routes, weapon caches, encrypted signals. Red lines crossed the region, unauthorized transports, night movements, inconsistencies that spread far beyond the base. "This wasn't a one-man operation," Cutter continued. "This was the surface." Mara stared at the map. "How deep does it go?" Cutter's jaw tightened. Deep enough that removing him created a panic. Someone else just tried to wipe the remaining records. Mara clenched her fists. "Where?" Cutter's eyes met hers, unwavering. "Your barracks building." Mara felt her stomach drop. Her locker was open. Her bunk was exposed. Her personal belongings, all of them, left unattended while she spoke to Tors. Her pulse surged violently. Tors stepped closer, his voice low. "Mara, someone went through your things." Cutter nodded at the MPs. "We already secured the room. Nothing was removed, but someone tried to access your footlocker." A chill slid down Mara's spine. "Not Reeves. Someone else. Someone still here." "Why my things?" Mara whispered. Cutter answered with a calm, heavy truth. "Because you're the one who knew the most, the one he feared the most, and the one whoever is left fears now." Mara swallowed hard. The base grew quieter around them, the kind of silence that meant everyone was listening, everyone waiting. "Lieutenant," Cutter said, stepping closer, "I'm assigning you temporary security detail, not because you're in trouble, but because your presence in this investigation is now essential." "You want me on your team?" Mara asked, stunned. Cutter's voice was steady. "I want you because you see what others pretend not to, because you listen to the part of yourself most soldiers silence, because justice needs people who don't look away." Mara felt something shift inside her, a spark, a pull, a direction she hadn't expected. But underneath, that spark was something darker. A memory. A whisper. Reeves once said, "You don't know what you've started." Maybe he was right. Maybe exposing him had only cracked the surface of something far more dangerous. Cutter lowered her voice. "This base is not clean yet, and someone wants you to stop digging." Mara breathed in the hot desert air, letting the weight of it press into her. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Cutter gave a faint, approving nod. "First," she said, "you need to see what they left behind." Mara felt her heart hammer as she followed Cutter and the MPs back toward the barracks. The sun felt harsher now. Shadows felt longer. Every step echoed with the knowledge that she had not merely toppled a corrupt officer. She had stepped onto the battlefield of something larger, hidden, and still moving. And for the first time since Reeves fell, fear returned. Not the fear of him. The fear of what came next. Why did her own room suddenly feel like enemy territory? The moment Mara stepped into the barracks, the atmosphere changed. Not visibly, nothing was overturned or broken, but she felt it. A presence, a disturbance, a fingerprint of someone else's intention lingering in the air like smoke after a match has burned out. The MPs stood rigidly near her bunk, their faces tight with tension. Cutter watched everything with a hawk's precision, her cane planted beside her like a judge's gavel. "Check the footlocker," Cutter said. Myra approached slowly. Her bunk was neatly made. The locker door was slightly ajar. Her boots had been moved half an inch to the left. Most people wouldn't notice. She did. She knelt by the footlocker, breath controlled, hands steady. When she lifted the lid, her chest tightened. Someone had touched everything. Her uniforms weren't folded the way she kept them. Her notebook was flipped to the wrong page. Her letters from home had been shuffled. A small patch, her unit patch, lay on top instead of beneath the fabric where she always kept it. Someone had been searching her life like it was a file. Tors stood behind her, jaw clenched. This wasn't random. "No," Cutter murmured. "They were looking for something." Mara swallowed. "But I didn't keep anything here. Anything important was already sent to you." "That means whoever it was doesn't know that," Cutter said. She lifted the edge of Mara's mattress, examining underneath. Nothing. She checked the shelf behind the neatly stacked hygiene kit. Still nothing. Cutter wasn't looking for items. She was studying patterns, tracing the intruder's thought process. "Lieutenant," she said, lowering her voice, "they weren't sure what you had, so they looked everywhere." Myra felt her throat tighten. "Do you think it was one of the soldiers, one of his loyalists?" Cutter took a slow breath. "I think someone Reeves trusted is still here, and they think you're a threat." Mara leaned against the bunk frame, breath catching. For months she had been the one being cornered, intimidated, suppressed. Now suddenly she was the one someone feared. The shift didn't feel empowering. It felt isolating. Tors crouched beside her. "Myra, tell me the truth. What else did you uncover? Something no one else knows." She shook her head. "No, I sent everything to Cutter, all the files, all the logs, but—" She hesitated. "But what?" Cutter pressed. "There was one thing I never understood," Mara whispered. "One night, months ago, he was moving crates from the weapons storage, but not to the armory. He took them to an off-grid building behind the motor pool." Tors stiffened. Cutter raised an eyebrow. "And you didn't follow?" the general asked. "I tried," Mara said, "but Reeves had posted guards. When I looped back the next morning, the crates were gone." "What kind of crates?" "Unmarked," she said, "but heavy, the kind that take two people to lift." Cutter gave a slow nod. "That explains a lot." "What does it explain?" Mara asked. "That someone else helped him move them," Cutter replied. "And that someone may still be trying to protect whatever those crates contained." The barracks felt smaller now, like the walls were leaning inward. Mara straightened. "Whoever came into my room wasn't looking for evidence. They were looking for me, for what I know." Tor's eyes sharpened. "Then they think you saw something you didn't report." Mara felt her heart beat against her ribs, not fearful, alert. Cutter motioned for the MPs to sweep the room one last time. "Nothing else here," one announced. But the lock on her footlocker was picked, cleanly. "Cleanly," Cutter repeated. So this wasn't a scared rookie or a panicked accomplice. "It was someone experienced," Mara said quietly. "Someone who moved with purpose. Someone who thought through consequences. Someone who believed she was still a threat." Cutter turned to her. "Lieutenant, I need to know something." Mara met her gaze. "That night," Cutter said, "the night you saw Reeves moving those crates, did anyone else see you there?" A memory flickered. Footsteps behind her. A shadow on the wall. The feeling she wasn't alone. She hadn't thought about it in months. "There was someone in the hallway," Mara said slowly. "But when I turned, they disappeared." Tors leaned forward. "Do you remember anything about them?" "A silhouette," she whispered. "Tall, broad, but whoever it was didn't want me to recognize them." The room went cold. Cutter inhaled through her nose. Then they saw you watching Reeves. And they think I know more than I do, Mara realized. You know enough, Cutter said. Enough to make them nervous. Mara exhaled shakily. The military base, once familiar, structured, predictable, now felt like a maze with shadows that moved when she wasn't looking. Reeves had been the visible threat, the monster in plain sight. But the real danger, it lived in silence, in shadows, in loyalty twisted into fear. Cutter's voice pulled her back. Lieutenant, walk with me. Outside, the sunlight felt more blinding than before. Cutter's convoy sat parked near the command building, engines still warm. MPs stood guard like statues carved from discipline. Cutter slowed her steps, letting Mara walk beside her. When I was your age, Cutter said, I learned a painful truth. Corruption rarely ends with the person you catch. Mara said nothing. It spreads, Cutter continued. It anchors itself in people who depended on that leader for protection, for gain, for fear. She paused. Reeves wasn't the mastermind. He was the shield. Mara felt her stomach flip. For who? That, Cutter said, is what we need to find out. They reached the edge of the yard, where the wind felt sharper. Cutter studied her carefully. I need someone who isn't clouded by politics or ambition, someone who sees the small things others overlook, someone who has already survived intimidation without losing their integrity. Mara didn't move. You want me to help lead the investigation, she said quietly. I want you, Cutter said, because the people who fear you will reveal themselves. Mara's pulse quickened, not out of pride but out of dread. I'm not sure I'm ready, she whispered. I just wanted to stop him. The wind tugged at Cutter's coat. That's the thing about stopping men like Reeves, Cutter said softly. It exposes the one standing behind him. Mara looked down at her hands, hands that had been steady in the yard, steady in the barracks, steady through months of quiet terror but now trembled slightly. What if I'm not strong enough, she whispered. Cutter placed her cane against the ground and spoke quietly, firmly. Strength is not what you show when people are watching. Strength is what you do when no one knows what you're carrying. Mara blinked hard, breath shaking in her chest. Cutter's voice softened even more. Tell me, Lieutenant, when you stood up to Reeves today, were you acting, or were you simply being yourself? Mara swallowed. I wasn't acting. Exactly, Cutter said. That's why I trust you. They stood there in the sun, shadows stretching long across the ground. Mara felt something shift inside her, not clarity, not confidence, but resolve. Quiet, steady, unforced. Okay, she whispered, tell me what to do. Cutter nodded. First, we find the building Reeves visited that night. Mara exhaled slowly. The off-grid storage building. The crates that disappeared. The shadow that fled. The person who broke into her room. It was all connected. Let's go, Mara said. But before they walked, Cutter added one last soft warning. And Lieutenant, be prepared. The truth we uncover may break your idea of what this base really is. Mara stood taller. Then it's time I see it. Why did the building feel like it had been waiting for her? The off-grid storage facility stood behind the motor pool exactly as she remembered it, isolated, silent, out of place. A forgotten structure on a busy military base was never actually forgotten. That was the first thing Mara had learned when Reeves began circling her. Buildings don't hide secrets. People do. But this one breathed with them. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting long amber streaks across the sand. Cutter stood beside her, leaning slightly on her cane, eyes fixed on the corrugated metal door like she expected it to blink. Tors flanked Mara's other side, jaw tight, scanning the perimeter. MPs guarded the rear. The air felt heavier than the dry heat should have allowed. This is it, Mara whispered. Cutter nodded. Tell me what you remember. Mara swallowed. It was late, after 200 hours. I came back from night drills and Reeves, he was here with two others. They were unloading crates from a transport. No markings, no logs, no authorization. And you approached? Cutter asked. I tried, but the guards he brought, men I'd never seen before, they told me to leave. Said it was classified. She paused. Reeves wasn't the type to handle classified work quietly. Cutter breathed out slowly. He was hiding something in plain sight. Mara nodded. Yes, and whatever it was, those crates were heavy like weapons or tech, or, her voice faded. Tours finished for her, or evidence. The wind kicked up dust. The world seemed to tighten around her. Open it, Cutter ordered. The MP stepped forward with bolt cutters. 2 snaps. A metallic rattle. The door slid open. A stale rush of air pushed outward, cold, old, metallic. Mara's stomach tightened. She stepped inside, senses sharpening instantly. The room was darker than it should have been, even with the sunlight filtering in. Empty shelves lined the walls, all wiped clean. No dust, no residue. Someone had scrubbed the place carefully. Tours paced slowly. This is too clean. Someone erased everything. Not everything, Cutter murmured. Her cane tapped the concrete twice, then scraped. Mara turned. Cutter was staring at the floor. A faint drag mark, barely visible. Then another and another. Impressions. Indentations. The ghost of weight pulled across the ground. Crates, Mara whispered. 2 dragged this way, one heavier than the others. Tours crouched. This one here, look, he pointed to a deeper groove. Whoever moved this was in a hurry, they didn't lift it properly. Cutter's eyes narrowed. Follow it. They traced the markings to the far corner where a false panel had been hastily screwed back in place. One screw was crooked. Another was stripped. The panel puffed outward slightly, as if someone tried to force it back after pulling something from behind it. Remove it, Cutter said. Tours yanked on the edge. The panel snapped off, hitting the floor with a clatter that echoed through the structure. Behind it was a narrow cavity carved into the wall. A hiding spot. Temporary. Sloppy. And empty. But something was taped to the back wall. A single sheet of paper. Mara reached for it with trembling fingers. Her eyes scanned it, and the color drained from her face. It was a list. Of names. Her name was on it. Third. Underlined. Cutter stepped forward. Let me see. Mara handed it over, her breath catching. Cutter's expression hardened. Targets, she whispered. People Reeves flagged as threats. Tours scanned the list. These are all personnel who worked near him, people who questioned him, people who refused to sign something. Mara's pulse hammered. I'm third, she whispered. Cutter folded the paper carefully. You were never a random victim, Lieutenant. You were a priority. Mara swallowed. Why? Cutter hesitated, only a moment, but Mara saw it. What aren't you telling me? She asked. Cutter turned toward her. The afternoon light sharpened the edges of the general's expression. Because, Cutter said softly, you were the only one who saw past his facade. You caught something others didn't. Mara shook her head slowly. I didn't. I swear I didn't know what those crates had. You didn't, Cutter agreed. But Reeves thought you did, and that was enough. Tours exhaled. So whoever's left still thinks she does. Mara felt her throat tighten. The break-in. The shadow that night. The feeling of being watched for months. It all pointed to one thing. Someone didn't want her alive. Cutter placed a hand gently on Mara's arm. I'm going to say something difficult. I need you to listen. Mara nodded, though her stomach clenched. You are now the most valuable witness on this base, Cutter said, and the most vulnerable. Mara forced herself not to look away. Because I'm the one they fear. Because, Cutter corrected softly, you're the one they couldn't break. The wind rattled the metal siding outside. Mara didn't feel brave. She felt exposed, like a spotlight had been shoved onto her without warning. Tors spoke quietly. Mara, when Reeves targeted you, you stayed silent. You wanted to protect the unit, but this goes beyond the unit. She nodded slowly. I know. Then you understand what we're up against, he said. She did. Too well. Cutter took a step toward her. Lieutenant, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Mara steadied herself. Ask. Why did you smirk at Reeves today? The question landed like a strike. Unexpected. Direct. Cutting deeper than she expected. Mara looked down. I think, she began, voice trembling, I think I reached a point where fear stopped working on me. Cutter listened intently. He pushed and pushed, Mara continued, and I kept shrinking. Every day I tried to be smaller, quieter, invisible. She paused, voice cracking. But today something inside me broke. Broke, Cutter asked. Not in a bad way, Mara said. More like snapped free. Silence. And when he told me to take off my uniform, Mara whispered, something inside me finally said no. Not quietly, not in a report, not in fear, in defiance. Tor's voice softened. That wasn't a smirk then. That was your dignity refusing to kneel. Mara blinked hard, eyes burning. Maybe, but it felt like I was watching myself from outside, like someone stronger took over for a second. Cutter stepped closer, her voice a low anchor. That someone was you, the real you, the one Reeves spent months trying to crush. Mara inhaled shakily as the truth washed over her. But then, a sound. A metallic thud outside. Quick. Sharp. Intentional. Tors froze. Did you hear? Another thud. Someone was out there. Cutter's voice dropped. MPs secure the perimeter now. They moved instantly. Mara felt her pulse spike. Her breath quickened, chest tightening in a way that wasn't weakness, but instinct. Someone was watching. Tors crouched near the door, peering out carefully. Mara moved beside him on reflex, her body remembering the training Reeves never had the power to suppress. Movement behind the generator, Tors whispered. Cutter stood back, letting the MPs advance, her eyes never leaving Mara. Mara felt something inside her shift again. Not fear. Not panic. Something colder. Sharpened. And then, a shadow darted. Vast. Silent. Deliberate. Contact, an MP yelled. Tors reached for Mara, pulling her behind a stack of crates as footsteps pounded outside. Cutter called commands with razor precision. MPs moved in formation. The intruder was fast, too fast for someone unfamiliar with the base layout. Mara's heart slammed. Whoever was out there knew exactly where to hide, where to run, where she would be. A voice crackled through the radio. Suspect escaped perimeter, footprints heading toward the fuel depot. Cutter swore softly. They won't get far, but they got what they wanted. Mara spun toward her. What do you mean, they didn't take anything? Cutter turned the list of names over. Lieutenant, she said quietly, they weren't trying to retrieve something. Mara's breath caught. They were confirming something. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They came here to see if you found the list. Mara's blood ran cold. Because now they know, Cutter said, eyes meeting hers, that you're closer to the truth than ever. The light outside dimmed as clouds slid across the sun. The shadow covering the building felt like a warning. A shift. A line being crossed. Mara wasn't just part of the investigation now. She was the center of it. And somewhere on this base, Someone was preparing for the moment they would have to silence her. Why did the truth feel heavier than any weapon she'd ever carried? Night fell faster than expected. The base lights flickered on one by one, glowing against the darkness like fragile promises. The air cooled, but Mara felt none of it. She sat in the operations room with Cutter and Tors, watching the shifting shadows outside the windows and listening to distant footsteps echo across the concrete. Her hands were steady, her breathing controlled. But inside something twisted, fear, yes, but not of dying. It was the fear of not knowing who she was fighting. Cutter stood at the table reviewing the list of names again. Reeves, 3 marked threats, 2 scratched out. Mara's name, still underlined once, bold enough to pulse like a heartbeat against the paper. Tors spoke softly. The intruder vanished near the fuel depot, tracks stopped by the chain link. Someone picked them up, Cutter murmured. Someone with clearance. Mara exhaled. So this goes beyond Reeves. It always did, Cutter said gently. You just didn't want to believe it. Mara didn't respond. She felt it. The weight of months of doubt, of silence, of bracing herself against an invisible enemy she couldn't name. Cutter tapped her cane against the concrete. Lieutenant, walk with me. They stepped into the cool night, the moon casting silver streaks across the motor pool, and the distant horizon glowing with desert darkness. Cutter walked slowly, not because she was old, but because she was thinking. Mara, she said quietly, you've spent months surviving. Now you need to start understanding. Mara looked ahead, understanding what? That Reeves wasn't an accident, Cutter said. He was chosen, placed here, supported, she paused, because men like him thrive in silence. Mara's throat tightened. Cutter glanced sideways at her. When you resisted him, he marked you. When you exposed him, you made yourself a symbol. I didn't want to be a symbol, Mara whispered. I know, Cutter said gently, but symbols aren't chosen, they're forged. They reached the far edge of the yard, where shadows pooled beneath a row of old utility sheds. The night air hummed slightly, like electricity hiding just beneath the surface of quiet. Cutter stopped walking. Mara, she said, I need to show you something. She motioned for Tors. He stepped out from behind a shed holding a folder Mara hadn't seen before, a heavy one stuffed with reports, logs, photos. Cutter took it, opened it, and held out one picture. A grainy image from a security camera. A silhouette in the hallway, the night Reeves moved the crates. Broad shoulders. Distinct stride. Mara's chest constricted. That's him, she whispered. That's the shadow I saw. Cutter nodded. We enhanced the footage. She handed Mara a second photo. Clearer. Not perfect, but enough. Mara recognized the uniform before she recognized the face. Staff Sergeant Colin Yates. A senior NCO. Respected. Disciplined. Quiet. Reeves's right hand for years. And someone who had smiled at her earlier that morning. Her breath faltered. He's still here. Cutter nodded once. He never left the base. He wasn't following Reeves. Reeves was following him. Mara felt the ground tilt. Tors kept his voice steady. He was the real handler. Reeves was just the loud face, the distraction. Cutter set the folder down on a crate. Mara, do you understand what that means? She did. Reeves wasn't the core of everything. He was a shield. A vessel. A man used for his arrogance, his ambition, his willingness to intimidate. But Yates was something else. Cold. Calculated. Invisible. The kind of danger people didn't see until it was too late. Mara felt her pulse thrum in her ears. Cutter stepped closer. Lieutenant, look at me. Mara lifted her head, eyes burning. This man watched you for months, Cutter said. Tracked you, tested you, waited for you to break. When you didn't, you became a threat to him. That's why your room was searched. That's why he ran tonight. But he's not running anymore. Myra's breath caught. What do you mean? Cutter's expression shifted, something between warning and regret. Torres stepped forward slowly. He's here. Myra blinked. What? Yates, Torres said quietly. He never left the area. A cold breeze touched her cheek. Myra turned sharply. A figure stepped from the darkness behind the utility sheds. Silent, measured, confident. Staff Sergeant Yates. His hands were empty. His face calm. His eyes locked on Myra with a focus that felt surgical. Torres moved instinctively in front of her, but Cutter raised a hand. No, she said, let her stand. The base suddenly felt too quiet. Yates stepped closer, not rushing, not flinching, just walking with the steady rhythm of someone who had rehearsed this moment. Mara, he said softly, as though they were discussing gear inventories, not betrayal. You're making a mistake. She felt her throat tighten. You went through my room. He didn't deny it. Didn't apologize. Didn't pretend. I had to know how much you saw, he said. What Reeves told you, what you found. You were there that night, she whispered, behind me, watching. Yes, he answered. Mara stared. Why me? A long silence. Because Reeves was impulsive, Yates said. But you were dangerous even before you knew you were. Her pulse raced. You see too much, Yates continued. You ask questions that don't sound like questions. You notice contradictions. You remember things other people forget. His jaw tightened. And people like that ruin everything. Torres took a step forward. You're done, Yates. Yates didn't even glance at him. His gaze never left Mara. Never blinked. Reeves was manageable, Yates said. Predictable, a man who wanted power more than truth. You wanted accountability. That makes you uncontrollable. Mara's voice shook with something deeper than fear, something breaking free. You threaten people. I protected the operation, he corrected. You stole supplies. I repurposed them. You intimidated soldiers. I maintained order. You tried to destroy me, she whispered. His eyes softened just slightly. No, I tried to keep you from destroying yourself. The logic twisted like barbed wire. Cutter stepped forward, voice sharp as steel. This conversation ends now. Yates didn't look at her. You should have kept your head down, he said to Mara. You were good, you were quiet, you were loyal until you were. Mara took a small step forward. Torres tensed. Cutter watched. Mara's voice trembled, not with fear but with clarity. I didn't change, she said. I just stopped lying to myself. Yates blinked. A small, stunned motion. You were never afraid of Reeves, Mara continued softly. You were afraid of someone who couldn't be controlled. For the first time, Yates' expression cracked. And in that crack, she saw what he'd been hiding all along. Fear. Of her. Of truth. Of being seen. Cutter's voice broke the silence. MPs. Lights snapped on. Footsteps thundered. Yates tensed, one last instinct to flee. But he didn't move. He knew it was over. The MPs closed in, cuffs clicking. Torres exhaled shakily. Cutter lowered her cane, but Mara just stood there, breath unsteady, staring at the man who had lived in her shadow for months. As Yates was dragged away, he looked back at her. You should have stayed silent. Mara exhaled, steady for the first time. Silence is where people like you grow, she said softly. Not anymore. Cutter rested a hand on her shoulder. Torres stepped beside her. The night finally felt lighter. Mara's chest loosened, not with triumph, something quieter, something steadier, a kind of peace she didn't know she needed. Cutter nodded once. It's done. No, Mara whispered. Not done, but better. Cutter smiled faintly. That's how justice begins. The sky stretched wide above them. The base lights glowed warm. The danger had passed, but the lesson hadn't. Mara looked at the moonlit yard where everything had begun, with shame, with intimidation, with fear, and now stood in the same place with something else entirely. Dignity, integrity, and the quiet strength of someone who refused to break. Sometimes justice didn't come with victory. Sometimes it came with scars. And sometimes dignity didn't need to shout, threaten, or fight. Sometimes dignity didn't speak at all. It simply acted,